$4,500 vanished from my bank account overnight, and when I checked the transaction history, the name tied to it was the one person my dad trusted more than anyone else in the family. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. My name is Emily Carter, and I've never been someone who lived beyond her means. I work long hours, save carefully, and plan every dollar because I don't have a safety net. That $4,500 wasn't extra money. It was my rent, my car payment, my groceries, and a small emergency cushion I had built over months of saying no to myself. Seeing it gone felt like the floor dropped out from under me. At first, I thought it had to be a mistake. Banks mess up sometimes, right? My hands were shaking as I refreshed the page over and over, hoping it would magically fix itself. But the number stayed the same. I checked the transaction details, my heart pounding harder with every second. When I saw the name connected to the withdrawal, my stomach twisted. It didn't make sense. That name belonged to someone my father trusted completely. My dad, Richard Carter, has always been emotionally distant. He's not cruel, just closed off, the kind of man who believes providing a roof is the same as showing love. Growing up, there was always a clear difference between how he treated me and how he treated my brother, Jason. Jason could do no wrong in his eyes. Mistakes were brushed off. Excuses were made. I learned early that if I wanted anything, I had to earn it on my own. I sat there for a long time, staring at my phone, trying to convince myself I was wrong. Jason wouldn't do this, I told myself. Even though we weren't close, I wanted to believe there was a line he wouldn't cross. I felt embarrassed for even thinking it could be him. The idea alone made me feel sick. When I finally went to my dad, my voice cracked as I explained what happened. I showed him the bank statement, pointed to the missing money, and told him how scared I was. I expected concern, maybe even anger on my behalf. Instead, his face hardened. He barely looked at the screen before shaking his head. He said I must have misunderstood something. He said banks make errors all the time. When I mentioned Jason's name, his tone changed completely. He told me to stop accusing people out of frustration. He said Jason would never steal from family, especially not from me. I tried to explain how important that money was, how I didn't have anyone to fall back on. He cut me off and told me I was being dramatic. According to him, I was letting stress cloud my judgment. I walked away feeling smaller than I ever had before. The money was gone, my fear was real, and the one person I hoped would listen had already decided I was wrong. When I think back to my childhood, the pattern was always there. My father didn't say he loved Jason more, but he didn't have to. Everyone could feel it. Jason was the one who got second chances, then third and fourth ones too. If he forgot his homework, it was because he was too creative to be stuck in rules. If he broke something, it was brushed off as boys being boys. Somehow, there was always a reason why Jason shouldn't be blamed. I was raised differently. I was expected to understand. To stay quiet. To be strong. If something went wrong, I was told not to make it worse by complaining. I learned early that emotions were something I had to manage on my own. When I struggled, I was reminded that I was mature for my age, and that maturity came with responsibility, not comfort. Jason, on the other hand, had a way with people. He smiled easily, talked his way out of trouble, and made promises he rarely kept. Teachers liked him. Neighbors defended him. And my father believed every word he said. When Jason messed up, my dad would sigh and say he just needed more time to figure things out. When I messed up, I was told I should have known better. There were times I needed help and didn't ask, because I already knew the answer. I watched my father show up for Jason again and again, while I learned to handle things myself. I worked part-time as soon as I was allowed. I saved money instead of spending it. I stopped expecting support and started depending only on myself. It wasn't something I chose. It was something I adapted to. As we got older, nothing really changed. Jason floated from one situation to another, always landing on his feet. When people questioned his choices, my dad defended him without hesitation. He truly believed Jason had a good heart and would never intentionally hurt anyone. Especially family. That belief was unshakable. Even when small warning signs appeared, my dad ignored them. He trusted Jason in ways he never trusted me. If I raised concerns, I was told I was overthinking or holding on to old grudges. According to him, Jason deserved patience, not suspicion. I didn't argue anymore. I swallowed my feelings and moved on, just like I always had. But inside, something was building. It wasn't anger, at least not yet. It was a quiet resentment that came from being unseen for so long. From always being the one expected to bend, to understand, to forgive. I learned how to survive without support, but that doesn't mean it didn't hurt. It just meant I carried the weight silently, waiting for the day when the truth would no longer be ignored. After the shock settled, I knew I couldn't afford to sit and hope the problem would fix itself. I went through my bank records slowly, line by line, even though it made my chest tighten every time I looked at the numbers. I checked dates, times, and the way the transactions were labeled. The withdrawals weren't random. They followed a pattern, spread out just enough to avoid immediate attention. What scared me most was how precise it all was. Whoever did this knew exactly where to go and what to do. They knew my account details, my security questions, and even the timing of when I usually checked my balance. That wasn't something a stranger could guess. It had to be someone who knew me well. I made a list in my head of people who could possibly have that information. One by one, I crossed them off. Friends didn't have access. Coworkers didn't know personal details. There was only one person who had been around long enough, close enough, and careless enough to overhear things I never thought would be used against me. That realization felt heavier than the missing money. I didn't want to accept it. I stared at the screen for a long time, hoping another explanation would appear. It didn't. The truth was sitting right in front of me, and it hurt more than I expected. I decided to confront Jason alone. I didn't want an audience or another argument that would go nowhere. When I brought it up, I kept my voice calm and showed him what I found. I watched his face closely, hoping to see confusion or surprise. Instead, he laughed softly and said I was mistaken. He told me I was stressed and seeing things that weren't there. He said he would never do something like that to me. Then his tone shifted. He started talking about how hard his life had been, how people always assumed the worst about him. He asked why I didn't trust my own brother. For a moment, I hesitated. He sounded sincere. He looked hurt. He reminded me of old memories, of times we were kids, as if that erased what was in front of me. He said if I really thought he was capable of stealing, then I didn't know him at all. I walked away feeling numb. Part of me wanted to believe him, because believing him meant I wasn't alone in this. But deep down, I knew the truth hadn't changed. The records were still there. The pattern was still clear. What hurt the most wasn't just the betrayal. It was realizing I had trusted someone who never deserved it. I wasn't just angry at Jason. I was disappointed in myself for giving him the benefit of the doubt, even when everything told me not to. After talking to Jason, I knew I couldn't keep this to myself. I gathered everything I had, bank records, dates, and notes I had carefully written down, and went to my father. I wasn't angry when I walked in. I was tired. All I wanted was for him to see what I was seeing. I placed the papers in front of him and explained each detail slowly. I pointed out the timing, the access patterns, and the way the money was taken. I asked him to just look at it with an open mind. He didn't. He barely glanced at the pages before pushing them aside. He told me I was reaching for conclusions. He said I was letting old feelings cloud my judgment. When I insisted, his voice grew sharper. He accused me of being jealous, of holding on to bitterness from the past. According to him, I had always had something against Jason, and this was just another attempt to make him look bad. That hurt more than I expected. I wasn't asking him to take my side without question. I was asking him to look at facts. But facts didn't matter. His loyalty was already decided. He said Jason wasn't capable of doing something like that and that I needed to stop stirring up problems in the family. I tried to explain that this wasn't about old issues or sibling rivalry. It was about money I had worked hard for, money that was now gone. He cut me off and said I was being dramatic again. He told me to let it go before I damaged my relationship with my brother even more. Something inside me broke at that moment. It wasn't loud or obvious. It was quiet, like a door closing. I realized that no amount of proof would change his mind. He didn't want the truth. He wanted peace, even if that peace was built on denial. I felt invisible standing there. Like my words didn't carry any weight at all. For years, I had tried to be patient and understanding, hoping that one day he would listen. That day wasn't coming. I left without arguing further. There was no point. As I walked away, I understood something clearly for the first time. The truth alone wasn't enough. If someone refuses to see it, all the evidence in the world won't matter. That realization hurt, but it also cleared something in my mind. I stopped expecting my father to protect me or stand up for me. From that moment on, I knew I would have to handle this my own way, without his approval or support. After that conversation, I stopped trying to convince anyone. I didn't bring up the missing money again. I didn't defend myself or repeat what I already knew. On the outside, it probably looked like I had given up. In reality, I had started paying closer attention. I watched Jason quietly. I noticed things I might have ignored before. He began spending more than usual, acting more relaxed about money. Small comments slipped out about things he bought, trips he planned, and bills he no longer seemed worried about. None of it matched what he had said about struggling. I didn't confront him. I didn't ask questions. I just listened. Every detail went into my memory. The timing lined up too well to be a coincidence. The days he talked about having extra cash matched the days the money disappeared from my account. Each connection made my chest tighten, but I kept my face neutral. There was a part of me that wanted to expose him immediately, to force everyone to face what he had done. But I knew how that would end. My father would defend him again, and I would be blamed for causing more trouble. I couldn't afford to be dismissed one more time. Instead, I stayed quiet and let the pain settle. Something shifted inside me during that silence. The panic and anger faded, replaced by a calm I hadn't felt before. I stopped reacting emotionally and started thinking clearly. I realized that pushing the truth onto people who didn't want it was useless. I began putting the timeline together in my head. When the withdrawals happened. When Jason suddenly seemed less stressed. When he stopped asking my father for help. Everything fit. I didn't need anyone to confirm it anymore. I knew what had happened. For the first time, I wasn't seeking validation. I wasn't trying to prove I was right. I was waiting. I understood that the truth has a way of coming out when people get comfortable. Jason was getting comfortable. I decided not to expose him yet. Not because I was afraid, but because I wanted the truth to speak for itself. I knew that if I stayed patient, he would eventually make a mistake. He always did. The hurt was still there, but it no longer controlled me. It turned into determination. I wasn't planning revenge. I was planning clarity. I would let events unfold naturally, and when the moment came, no one would be able to deny what was right in front of them. For now, silence was my strength, and watching was my strategy. Not long after that, Jason came to me on his own. His tone was different than usual, softer, almost desperate. He said things weren't going well for him and that he was under a lot of pressure. He talked about bills piling up and mistakes he couldn't undo. It was the same story he had told many times before, but this time I listened carefully. I didn't call him out. I didn't question him. I told him I understood how hard things could get and that I would help in whatever small way I could. I could see the relief on his face right away. He wasn't worried about lying anymore. He was confident I believed him. As he kept talking, cracks started to show. He mentioned amounts of money that didn't match the story he was telling. He slipped and talked about paying for things that someone struggling wouldn't be able to afford. He contradicted himself without realizing it, moving between excuses so quickly he didn't notice the gaps. I stayed calm and let him talk. Every word mattered. I remembered dates, details, and the way his story shifted depending on what suited him in the moment. I didn't interrupt or correct him. The more comfortable he felt, the more careless he became. Later, I wrote everything down while it was still fresh in my mind. I noted what he said, when he said it, and how it conflicted with what I already knew. I wasn't emotional while doing it. I felt focused, almost detached. This wasn't about confronting him anymore. It was about being prepared. My father was still around during all of this, watching without really seeing. When Jason talked about his problems in front of him, my dad immediately offered sympathy. He blamed bad luck and circumstances, never once questioning the story. Any small inconsistency was brushed aside. I saw clearly then that my father wasn't just ignoring warning signs. He was choosing to. It was easier for him to believe Jason than to accept the truth. That realization hurt more than I expected. I understood something important in that moment. My father wasn't just risking money or trust. He was risking his relationship with me. By protecting Jason at all costs, he was losing something he might never get back. I didn't argue or explain. I simply accepted it. Some lessons are only learned through loss, and I knew my father was heading toward one of his own. Things inside the family became tense as money problems started coming up more often. Bills were discussed openly, plans were delayed, and stress filled the room during simple conversations. Jason talked more than usual, trying to explain himself, trying to stay ahead of questions that no one had even asked yet. One evening, everything came together without me saying a word. Jason was talking to my father about his finances, explaining why he needed more time to sort things out. He started listing dates and amounts, trying to sound responsible. Halfway through, he mentioned a payment he claimed to have made weeks earlier. I saw my father pause. The date Jason mentioned didn't match what he had said before. My father asked him to repeat it. Jason hesitated, then corrected himself. The room went quiet. My father asked another question, this time more carefully. Jason answered too fast, then stopped, realizing what he had done. I calmly brought out the records I had kept. I didn't raise my voice or accuse anyone. I simply laid the papers on the table and pointed to the dates Jason had just mentioned. The numbers lined up perfectly. The timeline was clear. There was no space left for excuses. My father stared at the pages for a long time. This time, he didn't push them away. He read every line slowly. His confident expression faded as the truth settled in. He looked at Jason, waiting for an explanation that didn't come. Jason tried to speak, but the words didn't land. His story fell apart right there. The room filled with a heavy silence. It was the kind of silence that comes when something believed for years suddenly breaks. I watched my father struggle to process what was in front of him. His shoulders dropped. His voice, when he finally spoke, was quiet. There was no anger yet, just shock. The belief he had held onto so tightly was slipping away. For the first time, he didn't defend Jason. He didn't look at me like I was causing trouble. He just sat there, staring at the evidence, realizing how wrong he had been. I didn't feel relief the way I thought I would. I felt sadness. I was watching my father's world change, and there was no way to soften it. The truth had finally surfaced, and nothing would be the same after that moment. After that night, my father spoke to Jason alone. I wasn't in the room, but I could hear raised voices through the walls. When they came out, Jason looked smaller somehow, less confident than I had ever seen him. He avoided my eyes and kept his head down. Later, my father sat with me at the kitchen table. He looked older, tired in a way I had never noticed before. He told me Jason admitted to taking the money, but he tried to explain it away. He said he didn't mean to take that much, that he planned to pay it back, that things had just gotten out of control. My father repeated those words slowly, as if saying them out loud would make them easier to accept. Then his voice broke. He said he should have listened to me sooner. He admitted he had been wrong to dismiss my concerns and wrong to protect Jason without question. I watched him struggle to find the right words. Apologies didn't come easily to him. They never had. For a moment, he couldn't speak at all. He covered his face with his hands and cried quietly. It was the first time I had ever seen my father fall apart like that. The man who had always been so sure of himself was finally facing the consequences of his choices. He told me he failed me. That he had expected me to be strong while giving Jason every excuse in the world. Hearing that should have felt like justice, but it didn't. It felt heavy. Years of hurt don't disappear just because someone finally admits the truth. I nodded and listened, but I felt empty. There was no satisfaction in being right. Only exhaustion from carrying this alone for so long. The damage had already been done. Even though the truth was out, something between us had changed forever. Trust doesn't come back easily once it's broken. I knew our relationship would never be the same, no matter how sorry he was. I got up from the table and went to my room, leaving him sitting there. I needed space to breathe, to process everything. Forgiveness wasn't something I could offer yet, and I wasn't sure if I ever would. After everything came out, I made a decision that surprised even me. I stopped fixing things for other people. I didn't offer advice, money, or emotional support the way I used to. I wasn't angry or cold. I was simply done carrying responsibilities that were never mine to begin with. When Jason asked for help again, I said no. I didn't explain myself or argue. I just said I couldn't do it. For the first time in his life, there was no one rushing in to soften the fall. He had to face the results of his choices on his own. It was uncomfortable to watch, but it wasn't cruel. It was necessary. Without constant protection, Jason struggled. He had to deal with consequences he had always avoided. Excuses stopped working. People expected answers. The charm that once saved him wasn't enough anymore. He was finally forced to grow up, even if it came too late. My father watched all of this unfold quietly. He didn't step in the way he used to. I could see the regret in his eyes every time Jason failed to recover quickly. He understood now that his favoritism hadn't helped Jason at all. It had only delayed reality and damaged our family. I didn't celebrate any of this. There was no moment of satisfaction. My revenge wasn't about seeing anyone suffer. It was about choosing myself for once. I set clear boundaries and protected my peace, even when it made others uncomfortable. I focused on my own life, my work, and my future. I stopped waiting for approval or understanding. I didn't need to prove anything anymore. Walking away emotionally gave me a sense of control I had never felt before. That was my revenge. Quiet, simple, and real. Independence. I didn't raise my voice or demand apologies. I just stopped sacrificing myself for people who never protected me in return. For the first time, I felt lighter. Not because the past was fixed, but because it no longer owned me. Looking back, I realized that the stolen money wasn't the worst part. What hurt the most was the betrayal and the way trust had been broken. Money can be replaced, but when someone you rely on deceives you, it leaves a scar that doesn't fade easily. I learned that self-worth isn't about how much you earn or how much you save, it's about knowing what you deserve and refusing to settle for less. I understood something important about forgiveness. It isn't always necessary. Holding someone accountable is far more important than pretending everything is okay. Jason had to face the consequences of his choices, and my father had to face the results of his favoritism. Neither apology nor explanation could erase the damage, but both had to be acknowledged for anyone to move forward. I focused on rebuilding my life without seeking approval. I paid my bills, organized my finances carefully, and worked hard to create stability for myself. I made decisions based on my own needs and values, not to satisfy anyone else. That independence gave me a sense of peace I had never felt while trying to gain acceptance from people who never fully supported me. My father lives with regret. He sees now how protecting Jason at all costs hurt the family he loved. He understands that his choices have consequences that reach far beyond money. My relationship with him has changed, and the trust we once had cannot return the way it was. I accept that, and I keep moving forward. Jason also lives differently now. Without constant protection and excuses, he has to navigate life more carefully. He can't rely on charm or favoritism to shield him anymore. While I don't take satisfaction in his struggles, I know that accountability is necessary for growth. The lesson I carry with me is clear. Losing money hurts, but losing dignity and trust is far worse. Money can be earned again, but once trust is broken, it leaves a permanent mark. That mark teaches you who you are, who you can rely on, and who you need to distance yourself from. I have grown stronger because of this. I have learned to value my own judgment, to protect my peace, and to accept that some people will never change. Life goes on, and I go on with it, wiser, calmer, and determined to live on my own terms. Sometimes losing money costs less than losing your dignity, but losing trust costs everything.